So 22 says, Lucia Michel of the University of Chile observed that alkaline soils contain an insoluble form of iron that blueberry plants cannot absorb, thus inhibiting blueberry growth. If these plants were grown in alkaline soil alongside grasses that aid in iron solubilization, something Michel was determined to find out. So if he was determined to find this out, there must have been some kind of question that he was trying to answer. Question. Right? So if blah, 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 dependent clause, how are you going to make a question? The blueberries could survive. I mean, you could say this in speech, right? Like, you're hungry. If we kind of raise our voices towards the end, yeah, we can understand that the person is asking a question. But strictly in the form of the written word, what do we need? We need the can or the could at the very beginning of the sentence, right? Could the blueberries thrive? That's the way you need to phrase a question. All right. So after the question mark, then you have a new sentence, as evidenced by Michel was determined to find out. He was determined to find out the answer to the question as to whether the blueberries could thrive. Okay, let's take a look at number 23. In his 1963 Exposition of Music, Electronic Television, Korean-American artist Namjoon Paik showed how television images could be manipulated to express an artist's perspective. Today, Paik, something considered the first video artist. What do we need here? So a little bit of context in the past, right? He showed this thing. Okay, so this is past tense. Subject and verb, this is past. But what do we have? We have the word today. Okay. Future, past perfect, past tense, present, today, present. 24. The first computerized spreadsheet, Dan Brooklyn's VisiCalc, improved financial record keeping not only by providing users with an easy means of adjusting data in spreadsheets, but also by automatically updating all calculations that were dependent on these adjustments. And then what do we have? Prior to VisiCalc's release, changing a paper spreadsheet often required redoing the entire sheet by hand, a process that could take days. Okay. So here, after the comma, this is referring to which was a process. This process refers to redoing the entire sheet by hand. But I don't care about that part. The part that I care about is the gerund that's used here. This is the subject. What's the verb? Required. So this alone is an independent clause that we see here. Now, what do we need? Do we have a fanboys here? Because we have another independent clause here. VisiCalc. Let's see. So this we have additional piece of information that's inserted here. The most important word here is spreadsheet, and then improved. And then record keeping, then this is an object, a little bit less important, but spreadsheet improved. That's what we care about. That's a sentence right there. And then we have how it happened, not only by providing users with an easy means of adjusting data. So not only, but also blah, blah, blah. By automatically updating all calculations that are dependent on these adjustments, period. Yeah, because we don't have a fanboys. We already have an independent clause here. Okay, so if you're going to combine an independent clause with another independent clause, you would need a fanboys, but we don't have the option of fanboys. That's not presented here. So we're just going to have to use a period. And then we have prior to VisiCalc's release. So what is this? Dependent clause. Another piece of additional information. Doesn't do anything. It just marks the time, right? When something happened. It just shows when this situation happened. So before VisiCalc's release. And then the real sentence starts here. Changing a paper spreadsheet often required, and then blah, blah, blah. So that's the sentence. All right. Let's see what 25 has to say. In order to prevent non-native fish species from moving freely between the Mediterranean and Red Seas, marine biologist Bella Galil has proposed that a saline lock system be installed along the Suez Canal in Egypt's Great Bitter Lakes. The lock would increase the salinity of the lakes and blah, blah, blah. Natural barrier of water, and most marine creatures would be unable to cross. Okay. So it sounds like a hypothetical situation, right? If you propose this, then blah, blah, blah. So the lock would. So this is the verb that anchors the other two verbs. Increase. That's the first verb. And then it's going to be either create, it's going to be some form of the word create. What form do we want? Do we want ing? Do we want to be conjugated in this kind of way, or do we want a past tense? No. I would. Let's see. Let me come up with a sentence. I would either. I would, right now, I would eat the burger and drink the Coke. Eat the burger and I would eat the burger and drink the Coke. So what do we get? You see how these two verbs, eat and drink, they're anchored to the word would. Keep it in the original form. Yeah. So create. That's what you want here. There's no reason to conjugate it in the form of, say, a. It's not necessary. The lock would. First verb, increase and create. Increase what? The salinity of the lakes. Create what? And create a natural barrier of water. So technically, this sentence could be separated out into two. The lock would increase salinity of the lakes. That would be one sentence. So this would be one sentence. And then you could say, the lock would create a natural barrier of water. You could do that as well. Yeah. The and is helping you combine those two. Now the two sentences share a subject, and hence you don't need to repeat the word the lock. Okay, that's all it really is. All right. Now 26 says, despite being cheap, versatile, and easy to produce. Okay, so what is the thing that is cheap, versatile, and easy to produce? Not there, not problems. You see the possessive form here. So the only word that matters here is problems in the case of C. That's not what we care about. But plastics, that is the product that is cheap, versatile, and easy to produce. So all these are instances of dangling modifiers. Yeah, we don't want dangling modifiers. We want the subject, the very first word after the comma. That subject needs to be the very thing that is being described in the dependent clause that modifies that very subject. Okay, and that's it. So you see these kinds of questions quite often. Pay attention to these. If you understand this sort of technique and pattern, these questions are quite easy to answer correctly. 27. Stomata, tiny pore structures in a leaf that absorb gases needed for plant growth, open when, all right, so subject and verb, comma, comma, we have additional information here. Open when guard cells surrounding each pore swell with water. Okay. In a pivotal 2007 article, all right, this part doesn't do anything. What do we care about? Plant cell something showed. Okay, so it must be a person here. Biologist Yuri Lee showed. Okay. I showed that she can run. Right, that's a sentence, right? So, what's the subject? I. What's the verb? Showed. Showed. Now, what is the subject here? It's Yuri Lee. That's clear enough, right? Um, Now, instead of using the word I, could I say, for instance, let's say, let's come up with an interesting sentence, the kind man. Let's say this. So you could say the man, but you could also say the kind man. So this is the man is a noun, the kind is an adjective. Would you ever put a comma in between kind and man? Would you ever do this? No, not in a million years, right? So D, right? And would you put a comma after the word man? No, right? So therefore, think of the word biologist you really, all right? What kind of biologist? Plant cell biologist. This effectively, plant cell biologist functions as an adjective. It describes what kind of profession you really is engaged in. So you could have, people with the same name that are involved in different professions, different people. You could say, musician, you really. You could say, I don't know, film director, you really. You could say philosopher, you really. You could say accountant, you really. None of them would have commas in between the profession and the person's name. It wouldn't be necessary. It's a way of saying what this person does, right? So the profession functions effectively as an adjective, all right? No commas needed. 28 is small. Flat structures called spatulae are found at the tips of the hairs on a spider's leg. These spatulae temporarily bond with the atoms of whatever they touch. Okay. Spiders are able to cling to and climb almost any surface. All right. So I like the word cling to and bond with. It's like means to stick to something, right? Now, so I know these two are not going to be the case. We know that we need something that is from one sentence to the other, something that's compatible, that are um, you're looking at the same train of thought here. All right. It's not like some kind of sharp left turn. We don't see contrasting thoughts. So which one is better here between A and D? What's the real relationship between the first sentence and the second sentence? Temporarily bonding with the atoms. That sounds like the cause behind the phenomenon that is articulated in the sentence that comes after cause and effect. Cause and effect. I mean, I think I could see how in speech people might think that, A could work. But if A were to technically, like, this is like them using a college board using a trick question. In speech, it would sound just fine. But the thing is here, if you're going to use the phrase, for instance, I think you'd have to go more specific with the sort of scientific mechanism that involves the atoms and discuss more of that in detail. Yeah. Here, I think spiders being able to cling to and climb to any surface, that is the resultant phenomenon that is made possible as a result of this very cause slash reason. Okay, the fact that the spatula temporarily bond with the atoms. All right, that's the way you need to look at it. What about this question? In November 1934, Amrita Sher Gill was living in what must have seemed like the ideal city for a young artist, Paris. Okay. She was studying firsthand the color-saturated style of Francis, modernist masters, and beginning to make a name for herself as a painter. Something Shergill longed to return to her childhood home of India. Only there, she believed, could her art truly flourish. All right, so it seems like, she got famous. Or it says ideal city, Paris. That's where she was earning a living. Mm, yeah, she got to make a name for herself. And then what do we need? Even though that was the case, she still wanted to come to India. So Paris, she longed. There's a lot of emotion there. No matter how much success that she might have achieved in Paris, she still wanted to go back to her home, childhood home of India. Only there. That's where she wanted to be still. Okay. So this captures a sense of contrast, right? So I guess you could say, however, that could work as well. Nonetheless, nevertheless, those words could work as well. Um, 30 says before California's 1911 election to approve a proposition granting women the right to vote, activists across the state sold tea to promote the cause of suffrage in San Francisco. The Women's Suffrage Party sold equality tea at local fairs. Something in Los Angeles. Activist Nancy Tuttle Craig, who ran one of California's largest grocery store firms, distributed votes for women tea. Okay. So we have some context. So some kind of political context, women's right to vote. So that's what's established here. The real sentence, the independent clause happens here. Activists sold tea. Okay. Activists sold tea. Activists where? Across the state of California. And then we have Californian cities here. So it seems like we're going to get examples as to how the tea was sold by different activists in California. So the first sentence says, Women's Suffrage Party. So the party subject sold equality tea at local fairs. All right, that's an example of women in California selling tea. Activists, to be more precise. And then what do we need? Los Angeles, a similar activity, right? And then we have the first activists here, and then we have another activist here, right? So forget about all the stuff in between the commas. So we have party sold tea. That's the first sentence. And the next sentence, what do we get? Craig distributed votes for women tea. Okay. Similar activities on the part of activists. What about this one? All right, relevance question. Length of the two rail tunnels. What kind of length? Well, the comparison of the lengths is what we want. So where do we see numbers? 33 and 31. Okay, so we need 33 and 31. This only has 30. This only has 33. This doesn't have any numbers. So this is one of those giveaway questions. 33 versus 31. All right. Just to double check, 33. What is roughly 33 miles long? The second tunnel. It connects its, all right, so that must be 33 miles long. Okay, and then, so that was the second tunnel. And then we have the channel tunnel. Okay, it's 31. So 33 versus 31. We have the word while, right? That provides a form of contrast. All right, what about this one? While researching a topic, a student has taken the following notes. Okay, what do we care about? Provide an explanation and example of fauna. Explanation and example. Okay, let's see how this goes. John Ching is a Los Angeles-based painter. He uses the term fauna to describe the plant-animal hybrids that he depicts in his surreal paintings. Fauna is a combination of words flora and fauna. His painting Nectar depicts a parrot with leaves for feathers. His painting Prima Feral depicts a snow leopard whose fur sprouts flowers. Okay. So I care about what fauna is, and I also want an example of that. Okay. Now, in this instance? Well, I don't have enough. D doesn't provide, let's see, a good enough example. It just says created nectar. But what is nectar? We don't have a detailed enough explanation regarding what nectar is. The sentence here is John Ching refers to the subject of his paintings as fauna, and the definition of fauna is not properly provided. Here, in the case of D, nectar and primavera, okay, are types of flora. Fauna, a term that the painting's creator, John Ching, but how did this term fauna come about? It doesn't say. Now, in the case of A, it shows that it's a term that is combined as a result of, it is a term that fauna is a combination of the words flora and fauna. But what about the example? Doesn't have it. When you look at B, he uses the term fauna. And then within the commas, the sentence provides an explanation as to how the term fauna came about because it says it's a combination of these words. So that's where the explanation has happened. Okay. And then what? So John Ching uses a term fauna to describe. So John Ching uses a term fauna to describe the subjects of his surreal paintings. And then we get the very examples of fauna, don't we? A plant, animal hybrid such as a parrot with leaves for feathers. Yeah. So I guess the only thing that's left out here is the name nectar, but that's negligible. It's not that important. The name is just a name. What the painting nectar actually depicts, that information is more important, isn't it? Yeah. So the fauna is meant to be this surreal thing. What is the very example of that surreal thing? Parrot with leaves for feathers. Of course, there's no parrot in real life with leaves for feathers, right? So whatever this painting is called, that's a secondary issue. What's far more important is what this surreal painting is, and that is a plant and animal hybrid. So the parrot is the plant, right? And the leaves is the plant part for feathers. All right, so that's how you work out this question. What about this one? Uniqueness of Taylor's accomplishment. Uniqueness. Okay, so another relevance question. Where is the unique stuff? Unique as in one of a kind. Her accomplishment. Uniqueness of her accomplishment. All right, she fled. This says she fled. Um, she began working. Okay, and she wrote about the time she spent with the regiment. Ah, but it's here. It says, was the only black woman. I like the phrase, the only. That sounds like a unique thing. Okay. The only. Publishing a Civil War memoir. That sounds like an accomplishment, doesn't it? All right, let's double check. All right, escaped slavery and fled to Union Army occupied, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Began working. Okay, that's not exactly an accomplishment, right? Fleeing, not exactly an accomplishment. She published a book about the time she spent with the regiment. I guess you could kind of call that an accomplishment. Um, no, that I guess that is an accomplishment. But the important thing is um, the uniqueness of the accomplishment is highlighted in the sentence below that. The only Civil War memoir, right? The only Civil War memoir to be published by a black woman. That sounds like a unique accomplishment. Unique, the only. Yeah, that's the way to do this question. You have to think of what the word unique means. And that is encapsulated by the phrase the only. Okay. And that is also encapsulated in answer choice D as the only Black woman. All right, so that's how you do this question.